The Sports Town Podcast.
All right, I'm pleased to be joined by Jake from Around the League podcast. How's it going, Jake?
Doing good, man. How about yourself?
I am doing great. Of course, there's something big that happened on Wednesday night. Now, the time of this recording was on Thursday. We'll talk about the Suns and Suns defeating the Clippers in 6 games. But first, can you tell us more about your podcast, how it works, when it's released, all that good stuff?
Yeah, man. So I started with my co-host, who's actually a childhood friend of mine, back in November of 2019, and he actually started it with one of my other friends in the summer of that year. But then they kind of just did one episode. You kind of know how it goes, where this podcast go 1 or 2 episodes, whatever, and then you kind of forget about it. But then we brought it on before quarantine. It wasn't the quarantine podcast, but quarantine's kind of where we made our first strides. Got on our big guest, and we kind of just started rolling with it. So I'm just a big basketball fan, as he is, and so we just talk about hoops. That's what we like to do, and I've been really invested in these playoffs, man. Let me tell you that.
Well, they've definitely been crazy, especially with the Suns getting to the finals, all the injuries that happened. Let's talk about the Suns and Clippers. Of course, the Suns beat the Clippers in 6 games. Chris Paul is finally in the finals. What do you say of the Suns? Do you think the Suns can win it, or do you think there's a better chance that the Bucs, if they have Giannis, they can take it all?
Yeah, well, that's the big question, right? It's whoever comes out of the East, are they going to be fully healthy with their number one option? So as far as the Suns go, I mean, it could just be the healthiest team in all of basketball right now. And there's only 3 teams left, but that's saying a lot when you look at the other side right now. So I really do think that the Suns, I think whoever they play, the Bucs might be a better option or a better team on paper. But I do think that like the inconsistencies of what we've seen from the Bucs, I think Giannis, especially him being out right now, has been their most consistent player. And then besides that, it's up for debate who's that like second, third most consistent player. So they definitely need him. But if he's in, it's going to be interesting. I think that Brook Lopez is going to be an interesting factor because we've seen him against like guys like Bruce Brown, where he was just giving up straight floaters to him in one game. Then you had Trae Young, who he was going off in game 1 against Brook Lopez as well. So we'll have to see how that goes with like Chris Paul and Devin Booker, because they can go get their shot in the mid-range area, as we all know. So I think that's going to be an interesting matchup. But yeah, I think that like the inconsistencies, I mean, it starts from the top with Coach Budenholzer. We don't know what we're getting out of him from game to game, as we know what we're getting from Monty Williams from a game-to-game adjustments. So I do think that the Suns are the most consistent team left and the healthiest team left. So I would say I've been wrong with a lot of predictions this postseason. I actually thought that the Suns would lose in the first round against the Lakers, but then it spiraled out of control where like AD with the groin, and then LeBron wasn't 100% either from you could even see that in the play-in. So yeah, I do think that like I've been wrong about a lot of things, but I would say the Suns. I would put some money on that.
I originally thought the Lakers would somehow pull it or would end up beating the Suns in the first round just because it's the Lakers, just because it's LeBron. But yeah, I think with AD's injuries and of course LeBron not being 100%, and then of course you look at how well the Suns play, especially in game 4, 5, and 6. But yeah, the Suns have had a great run. I definitely agree with you as well about whoever the most healthiest team. And it seems like the Suns are getting super healthy now with Chris Paul being back. Devin Booker seems like he's fine. But my question about the Clippers is if they would have had Kawhi Leonard, and if they would have had Zubac, and if they would have had all their roster at 100%, I think they would have beaten the Suns. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to think about hypotheticals, right? But if you insert Kawhi Leonard, who's been there before, if you insert Zubac, who I thought had a pretty good series and really challenged Ayton in a lot of different aspects, and pick and roll coverage and the rebounding aspect and whatnot. I really think he had a good series. And even, I don't know if you mentioned Ibaka. I mean, that's a guy that they picked up over the summer, and he wasn't healthy throughout the entirety of these playoffs, as we know. So I think with definitely all three of those guys back, like they definitely would have contested them even more. I mean, the Clippers were a team that showed a lot of heart in these playoffs for guys that from Reggie Jackson, who was bought out from the Pistons and was sort of just like on his last leg with the Clippers in terms of his NBA career. And then you have like DeMarcus Cousins, who was just picked up, this past, what was it, like February, whatever it was. And then you have a guy like Terrence Mann, who I'm a big fan of because I go to the same school that he came out of. So, he's put up some great minutes. So, I mean, just seeing like their overall roster construction and how they've been able to just steal game after game. I mean, no one thought they were going to even beat the number 1 seed in the Jazz. So, just seeing how they've really just battled. I think if they had Kawhi Leonard, I mean, because their offense is just kind of like at times, like it's not really anything special. And if you don't have Paul George going off like he did in game 5 where he scored 41 on great efficiency, if you don't have that guy rolling, then there's going to be troubles for sure.
Yeah, because I think when Kawhi went out, they said, "Oh, there's the Clippers' chance of winning it all," and then they end up taking 2 games from Utah. They end up somehow winning 2 games against Phoenix, and I always, for some reason, forget about Serge Ibaka, to be honest with you. But yeah, if they would have had Serge Ibaka, Kawhi Leonard, Zubac, I think they would have probably ended up winning. But again, you really never know with how well the Suns played this year. How well do you think the Suns will? Or we've kind of already mentioned this, but Phoenix is finally in now. Do you think that will make, let me rephrase that. With Chris Paul finally making his first NBA Finals, does that finally put him in the possible top 5 in point guards of all time? Or what do you think about Chris Paul's status of being somewhere in the elite, like being super elite now that he's finally made an NBA Finals?
Yeah, I think definitely like I would say top 5. Yeah, I would say that just because like. And it really put into perspective. Yesterday, I was listening to the after the game where they were starting to do the trophy presentation, whatever. Mark Jackson kind of put it in perspective. He's like this is kind of just a win in terms of his like point guard conversation, Hall of Fame conversation. We already know he's a Hall of Fame point guard, but in terms of just like taking a team to the finals, that's a win because this guy was, and in my opinion, outside of LeBron, I think he's the most impactful player in the NBA. Like a guy that you could just put on any single NBA team, he can just transform that team. Because taking a team to the finals without even winning the ring, like let's discard that just for now, is a huge accomplishment. I mean, this is a team that was out of the playoffs for the last decade, and it just and it wasn't only him; it was Jay Crowder who had a big game last night in Game 6, and obviously had a historic run with the Heat last season. And he's back-to-back finals now. So just to see like Chris Paul come in and see like the effect that he's had on this whole entire roster. I mean, I didn't really know like Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton. I knew they were good. I didn't know they were this good where they would come out and show like they really didn't have any because that was like my whole thing in the first round was like, I just feel like they're 1 year away. I feel like they're too inexperienced just because of the roster around Chris Paul. And I think that was kind of where a lot of people had their reservations was that, look, I think these guys can be a middle of the pack team. I'm not sure if they can be a top seed. And they proved us wrong there. They also proved us wrong where I thought they were going to get knocked out by the reigning NBA champions. So, I mean, Chris Paul just taking this team to the finals is an accomplishment in itself. And I think it deserves more notoriety than what people think it should be.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, like what Chris Paul did last year with the Thunder, when he was traded to OKC, they thought, oh, the Thunder are going to be trash now, and they're probably going to trading Chris Paul sometime in the middle of the season. All of a sudden, he leads the, Thunder to the playoffs, which was amazing. But yeah, I would definitely think Chris Paul is somewhere in the top 5 or top 10 among the best point guards of all time. What did you think about Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton's performance? Because they really stepped up this year, especially, I think, of course, adding Chris Paul helped him a lot. But what did you think about their performance this whole postseason?
Yeah, I think I want to say, well, we saw with DeAndre Ayton in this past series where, like, I think when he's on, like, they're on type of thing. Because, like, when you're able to feed a guy like that where he has so much more talent than I thought he did. And honestly, like he could be a guy that he's not really like a post threat where you could just throw him in and he could just like body someone. But I mean, the hook shot's there, a guy that can, I mean, he has a mid-range jumper that's there and he can hit it. But I think like even more impressive with DeAndre Ayton, now that I'm thinking about it, is the fact that like we saw Nurkic on Jokic and just like how much foul trouble he was in. Like when he was playing Jokic, like the MVP of this year, like he really did not give up much to the MVP. I mean, again, the guy's going to put up what he puts up. But at the same time, if you're able to do it without fouling, that's even more impressive. And I think like throughout that whole entire series, I don't have the numbers pulled up, but the guy literally did not foul that much. And I think like, Nurkic like fouled out in like game 2, game 3, like 3 games out of that series, he fouled out 3 or 4 games. And I think it's just a testament to what DeAndre Ayton, the work that he's put in, the team that he's on with Monty Williams. And a lot of this is due to Monty Williams. And I think like the player relationships that he has with a lot of these guys, and then just putting them in the right spots and drawing up plays and whatnot. Like, for example, that one of the first games where they drew up that play and threw it up to Ayton for the win. I mean, that's a great play drawn up by Monty Williams and a great pass from Jay Crowder. And so I've just been blown away by DeAndre. And as far as Devin Booker goes, I just think the guy is, I do agree with a lot of people, like the next coming of like Kobe Bryant. Like I do see a lot of similarities in that game. And again, the guy can get his shot in a multitude of ways. I mean, when he's going around in pick and roll, I mean, he looks Chris Paul-esque, like he looks like his teammate. And so I do think that like what we've seen from both of these guys has been, monumental in these playoffs. And a lot of it, again, is luck in terms of like the road that they were able to get to the finals. It is luck. But you have to respect like just the talent level that they have for such a young team.
Yeah, and it's like I said, DeAndre in the first few years of his career, where everybody was kind of comparing him to, of course, Luka Doncic, Trae Young. But I think this year he's really proven. I mean, he's not better than Luka Doncic or Trae Young, but he's finally proved that he was a good pick. And I was always pretty high on DeAndre Ayton to start with, but I think the Suns finally got what they wanted out of Ayton, and I think this is going to be a great duo for the next few years to come. So. Right now, it looks like Giannis could be out at least for Game 5. I'm not sure what his other status is, but who do you like in the Eastern Conference right now? And do you think there's and then whoever comes out of the Eastern Conference, who do you think wins it all?
Yeah, I'll just say this first. I don't really want the Bucs to win necessarily because I'm still salty about what they did to my Miami Heat, but it's okay. Bryn Forbes isn't lighting it up, so all right. But at the same time, it's tough to kind of predict the outcome of that series just because we've seen Trae Young. Without like him, they did fine, but it was only a game, so it's a small sample size as well as like Giannis. It's only been half a game, and so we look at both those teams without their respective players, and I have more confidence actually in the Hawks just because like. Based off of what I've seen. Like I haven't seen like the Milwaukee offense. I've even seen the Milwaukee offense though with Giannis, and it's not like a lot of it's Bud because it's just not a lot of movement or whatever. Like that's kind of what they fell into with the Nets series. But as far as like they lose a lot with Giannis. Like let's just be honest, the most consistent scorer. I've talked about it before. A guy that can screen for like your ball handler, whether that be Holiday or Middleton, and that's deadly because you have to like cover Giannis rolling into the rim, but you also have to cover like a guy like Drew Holiday or Middleton that can go get their own shot off that pick and roll. So it's like really hard to defend. But when he wasn't out there, like you saw in just that small sample size of half a game, in which like there wasn't like any movement whatsoever. They were just kind of like it was just kind of like bailout basketball, where it was like okay, Middleton's not, and that's the thing with Middleton too. I don't mean to criticize him, but like it's just like you see time and time again, like he'll come out and have like a poor second half, like he did last game, but then in Game 4 he's coming out or Game 3, excuse me, game 3 coming out in the second half, and there's no one that could stop him in that second half. I mean, he put up like 20 in the second half. So there's kind of like that hero ball with Middleton where it's like, okay, just go get me like some buckets, and he'll give it to you consistently in one game and then inconsistently in the other game. And so it's a question about like who's that second guy. And like you could go as far as to say like it's Bobby Portis, because every time he comes in, it's straight energy. You know what you're going to get from him. And I think like off the bench, he's been one of the most productive players. You could say like Connaughton more or less, I guess. But I think it's probably been Portis, like their best. And he was one of their best 3-point shooters throughout the whole entire season. So you really don't know outside of Giannis what you're going to get. And that's the thing that scares me with the Bucs. As far as the Hawks go, we've seen how they can operate without Trae Young. I mean, Lou Williams, to a lesser extent, obviously, came in and gave them, I'm not going to say like Trae Young type minutes, but I mean, similar to that in the fact that he was getting pick and rolls, whatever, he was getting to his spots. Lou Williams can, ISO a guy. We all know that. But I think like down the stretch, I'm not sure if I can. It's tough to predict that series. I would say like on paper, it's easy to say Bucks in like 7. And that's what I was kind of going towards. But I still have to see more. But I would say that right now. I just don't really have too much faith in like the Bucks offense. But I can see like 1 or 2 games where Chris Middleton is playing that type of basketball down the stretch. And I think that's what they need to fuel some victories.
I've heard this a lot of people have said, and I think he's a number 1. But do you think Giannis is a number 1, or is he more like a number 2? And to be honest with you, I think he's a top 5 player in the league, and I think he's a number 1. But I've heard so many people have said he's not a number 1, he's a number 2. What do you think about Giannis? And if he's not a number 1, is Middleton that guy, or just who do you think the number 1 guy for the Bucks is?
Yeah, well, I would ask people like, do people think Middleton's number 2? Because then or do they think Middleton's the number 1? Because if not, like who else is? I think Giannis is, because we've seen like him be the anchor of a defense. He's a great help defender. He's reigning defensive player of the year. And he's a guy that you can throw in there and he can guard pretty much, I mean, anyone. You throw him out there and he can guard pretty much anyone. So you have a guy that can set screens, a guy that can roll to the rim, a guy that can, when he wants to, take down anyone in the paint. And again, the thing that's lacking, and I think this is what people are probably like taking the notch down on him in terms of like where he ranks on that team, which I think he's a 1. But as far as like his shooting, I think like his 3-point shooting, once again, there's times where, and I actually think I'm one of the people that thinks that him taking 1 3 a game isn't bad. Like if you're open, shoot it. Like I don't see what's wrong with that. If you shoot 8 of them, then that's a different story. And you're not hitting any of them, obviously, don't take them. But I'm not opposed to the guy taking 1 3. I think people overreact whenever they see Giannis taking like 1 3. And the free throw shooting, yeah, it's got to improve. But look, and this is how I look at it. At least he's taking the drives to the rim, and he's been increasingly better throughout these playoffs in doing that and being more aggressive and playing his style of basketball. And that has a lot to do with like the Bucks defense as well, getting out in transition. That just fuels Giannis's game. But the way I look at the free throw shooting is I compare it to like Ben Simmons. Like Ben Simmons won't even go to the line. At least Giannis tries to go to the line, on top of the fact that they're doing the 10-second countdown, or the count up, I guess. And the fact that like that's got to be like a lot of pressure on you. At least he's like taking it to the hole. At least he's showing like he's a confident guy in doing that. And I think that like that shows a lot from a player, because you have Ben Simmons, which they're not even trying to count up. They don't do that. And Philly's encouraging him to go to the line, because that's not where he thrives, but it's a place where, you can get an easy 2 points, So yeah, I think the honest criticism just comes down to the shooting, and that's pretty much it. I think everything else he does impacts a team, and it impacts it at a high level. So,
To be honest with you, I think Giannis is a top 3 player. I'm like you. I think his shooting is really the only weakness in his game. Now, of course, his free throws isn't good either, but I just think it's just shooting is just not his strength. But to be honest with you, I think he's a number 1 all the way until the fourth quarter with a few minutes left. Then you need to give the ball up to Chris Middleton and let him make a few shots because the Bucs, I think, are better when that happens. But we'll see what ends up happening. There's another guy that's been super impressive this postseason. That's Kevin Huerter. And I believe I don't know if he's a free agent or not, but supposedly if he is, he's going to get a massive contract in the offseason. What do you think about Kevin Huerter's future, and how impressed with Kevin Huerter have you been?
yeah, I've been actually super impressed with Kevin Huerter. I've tweeted about this before. He's actually been one of my favorite players to watch because he does things on both sides of the ball that you want out of a guy that you have on your team. He's a great two-way guard. I think like defensively, he keeps his ground and stays put and does the things that you want to win basketball games. And then as far as like offensively, he can be sort of a guy that can give you, we saw in the Philadelphia series where he, in that closeout game, he had like 25 points, something like that. And so he can be a guy that you can go to in moments like that. And I think like pairing him along with Trey is a great thing. I think both of them, I think the guard play, and I think this can lead to that kind of conversation where like they have great guards. I think like what we've really underestimated is this Atlanta Hawks team with just how far they've come. And that's because of like a guy like Lou Williams, where they don't really skip a beat too much because you have a guy in which he's been in these moments in the playoffs. Then you have Bogdanovich, who again dealing with injuries is one thing, and again the guy he's had a great postseason, up and down, but it's because of the injury. Like if he wasn't injured, I think he's definitely a contributor there. Trae Young, it goes without saying what he does, and I think like it was surprising to see the Hawks pull that out. I think that's probably because the Bucs are just being the Bucs, and I know I'm getting on the Bucs a lot, but they're a talented team, so there's nothing to really take away from them. But I did lay out my criticism with them. But then Kevin Huerter, like you said, he's been great, and I think like both sides of the ball. He played great defense the other night, and so did like Bogdanovich, Cam Reddish. All those guys were coming in, and some of those guys haven't even played for months. So for them to go in and get rotational minutes, they surely proved that they were worthy of them.
Yeah, again, I've been super impressed with Kevin Huerter as well. And to be honest with you, not a lot of people gave the Hawks much of a chance this series, and they have done an excellent job. I mean, even this playoffs, no one has really given them much. I think they were expected to lose the Knicks in the first round, and that obviously didn't happen. So again, kudos to the Hawks, and like the Suns, they're probably going to be here for the next few years if they can keep that core intact. And of course, Trae Young will just get better and better once, of course, he gets healthy and stuff. And again, thanks for coming on. As we wrap up the interview, let's talk more about what's going to happen this offseason. Now, you mentioned you're a Miami Heat fan, and it feels like, and I've heard this from a lot of people, and I think it was mostly from Chris Broussard from Fox Sports. He mentioned that the Miami Heat need another star to pair with Jimmy Butler. Who do you think they could get? And I guess they could get Kawhi Leonard. There's been a lot of rumors about him going to Miami. I personally think he's going to stay with the Clippers. But what do you think the Heat need to do this offseason in order to get back to what they were in the bubble?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of rumors, and this is what Heat fans like to get into, Knicks fans even like to get into. It happens more often than what the Knicks have done, just because we fell out in 2017 to like Gordon Hayward, KD. So we've had our fair share again with Jimmy coming. What was it, 2 summers ago? That's been something that's kept our hopes high in terms of like getting another free agent. I don't know. I wouldn't really. I've been telling people like I'm not really getting my hopes up because I think like there's a better opportunity in the trade market in terms of like who we can get there. because as far as our cap situation goes, it's just kind of like we can get rid of Goran Dragic and Andre Iguodala are only team options, so we can release them if we're trying to like make some space. But I don't see like Kawhi Leonard leaving LA, as you said. I don't see him leaving there, especially with seeing what they could have done with him. I just feel as if, and also the management's gonna really persuade him to stay because they spent so much capital in terms of like the draft and players to get him and Paul George in LA, where it's like if they lose him, it's not really a good sight in terms of like, you know, the assets that they'll have moving forward because they'll lose him for nothing. So I really don't think like people have been saying like we need a stretch four, and I wholeheartely agree with that because we need a guy that can space the floor unless Bam can develop a reliable jump shot, which we've seen like him increase his mid-range jumper and really use that efficiently this season, or at least more efficiently. And so he's really developed his game. I hope that Team USA like really brings him in terms of his development and rises that. But someone that can, unless he develops his own jump shot, we need someone that can space the floor. That's someone that like Jay Crowder that really like spaced the floor for us, was a guy that allowed us to play sort of small ball on defense last season and really allowed us to break through in the NBA playoffs in the bubble last season. So we need someone like that again because Trevor Ariza, he's aging and he's a veteran in which he was providing us good minutes when like we first got him, but then kind of like tailored off. Dedmon's been great, but again, not a shooter. And these are guys in which they're great for the team, but we need someone that can be a reliable stretch four. So in terms of your question, I would say like, again, I wouldn't really trust the free agent market that much. I have seen Colin Sexton just because he's been rumored to leave the Cavs in terms of like just his relationship with the organization. People on the team reportedly called him a ball hog and all that stuff. So I think he would fit the Heat culture pretty well, and I see a lot of fans getting excited about that. And there's a package in which it sends him and Kevin Love. So that's something you could look into just because I believe Kevin Love's on it expiring. I could be wrong about that, but I believe he is. So you give that a test run, see how that goes. And he's that guy you could plug in there. Although he is another veteran, it is the guy in which can help you win. And if it doesn't work, then so what? You gave it a shot 1 year. And then Colin Sexton is a guy that you bring in defensively, or not defensively so much, but definitely offensively. I think him is a sort of like a microwave scorer. That's a guy that can come in and really give you a lot of production there. And again, we just need guys that can score because our offense was not that great. Defensively, I think we're fine, but definitely offensively, I think we need some improvement, especially in our backcourt with, I think, just inconsistency all season with like Tyler. We thought we were going to get more. With Goran, we thought we were going to get more. And just to kind of just, Kendrick Nunn, when he was put in there, like had a big stretch, like 20, 25 games where he was really going off when we had our COVID stuff, injury stuff. And so, yeah, I know I'm rambling, but just as far as like Colin Sexton, Kevin Love, I think that could be something you look into. Dame, I think, is more unrealistic just because of the packages I think teams will give for him. But again, I think that I would love Dame in Miami. I just don't know if like we'll have the necessary package that I think other teams will give for Dame. So.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with a lot of those. Kyle Lowry, in my opinion, is another guy that you could go after. I feel like he'd be pretty cheap because it feels like he's out of Toronto, and I'm not sure if he's a free agent, but either way, I think he's going to end up leaving Toronto because I think the Raptors, that core probably needs to be just exploded and restart over them, and they got their championship. So it'll be a definitely interesting offseason. I've said this a lot as well, too. It seems like the free agent class isn't very deep. So you're going to see a lot of trades happening and just a lot of different, moving parts in the NBA, just like every year. But just with this year, the free agency class not being as deep and as good. But yeah, so as we end the interview, again, thanks for coming on, Jake. Is there anything you have store for your podcast, and where can we find it? I'm assuming we can find it on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And then where can we also follow you on social media?
Yeah, so I just want to say first off, thanks for having me on. Definitely had a good time with the interview. So I appreciate the invite, having me on this thing. So as far as our podcast, you guys can find us we're on Apple Pod, Spotify, Anchor app, around the league. And then as far as our Instagram social medias go, Instagram @_around the league _ Twitter @_ATL podcast _ I'll just say those because those are really the two most, I would say like the two most like popular in terms of like the activity level on those. So that's the ones where we're the most active. And then as far as we are trying to start a YouTube channel, that's something that's in the works. So be on the lookout for that. But yeah, that's pretty much it, man.
All right. Thanks for coming on. Again, don't forget to check him out. His podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Around the League. You can also follow him on Instagram and Twitter. Thanks for coming on, Jake, and have a wonderful day and enjoy the playoffs.
Yes, sir. You too, man.
Thanks for listening to the Sports Town Podcast, or the STP Pod for short. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and much more. Also, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter @SportsDown Podcast. If you want to check out more videos of the Sports Down Podcast, click on the right.